The frigid air of Anchorage, Alaska became the backdrop for a pivotal and tense diplomatic encounter. On August 15, 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin met for over 3 hours at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. The meeting, shrouded in secrecy until the last moment, was aimed at finding a way out of the grinding war in Ukraine. Both leaders emerged from the talks using carefully chosen words, describing the discussion as productive and useful. President Trump went further, telling reporters there had been great progress, yet no formal ceasefire or binding agreement was announced, leaving the world to wonder what, if anything, had truly changed. At the heart of the summit was a bold and uncompromising proposal from the Russian leader. Vladimir Putin offered to freeze the current front lines, effectively halting the fighting that has ravaged Ukraine for years. However, this came with a significant condition. Russia would demand full and internationally recognized control over Ukraine's entire Donbas region. Putin framed this not as a concession, but as a necessary step to address what he termed the root causes of the conflict. This proposal essentially asks Ukraine to trade a vast, industrially vital territory for a cessation of hostilities, a difficult bargain under any circumstances. President Trump, now positioning himself as a primary dealmaker, took this proposal directly to his allies. Following his meeting with Putin, he held a lengthy conference call with European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump's position has shown a notable shift. He is now advocating for a direct and comprehensive peace agreement rather than a preliminary ceasefire. This approach diverges from the long-standing preference of both Kiev and Brussels, which has always been to secure a halt in the fighting before entering into broader political negotiations. Trump is trying to force the issue, believing a grand bargain is the only way forward. The immediate aftermath of the summit has set the stage for a flurry of diplomatic activity. The proposal from Putin, now carried by an American president, has forced every nation involved to reassess its strategy. The lack of a joint press conference or a detailed communique from the Alaska meeting only adds to the uncertainty. While Trump speaks of progress, the core demands from Moscow remain as stark as ever. The world now watches to see if this high-stakes gamble will lead to a breakthrough or simply entrench the existing divisions, leaving Ukraine to face an even more uncertain future on the battlefield. The reaction from European capitals to Putin's proposal has been a mixture of cautious engagement and deep-seated skepticism. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte participated in the call with President Trump. While they publicly welcomed the American commitment to providing Ukraine with security guarantees should a peace deal be reached, there is significant apprehension behind the scenes. European leaders have long insisted that a verifiable ceasefire must be the first step, a foundational principle that Trump now seems willing to bypass in his pursuit of a larger agreement. This skepticism was voiced most directly by European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas. She expressed a prevailing concern among many European officials, stating that she believes Vladimir Putin is simply dragging his feet. The fear is that this proposal is not a genuine offer for peace, but a strategic maneuver designed to sow division among Western allies, and buy time for Russian forces to consolidate their gains on the ground. For Europe, the memory of past failed agreements with Moscow looms large, making them wary of any deal that appears to reward Russian aggression with territorial concessions, which could set a dangerous precedent. The United States, under President Trump, has signaled a clear change in its approach to resolving the conflict. By prioritizing a final peace deal over an initial ceasefire, Washington is breaking with its allies' established diplomatic sequence. To sweeten the pot for Kyiv, Trump has offered substantial U.S. security guarantees, a promise that Ukrainian leaders have sought for years. However, this shift comes at a price. Recently, the U.S. announced it was halting the delivery of some previously pledged weapons to Ukraine, citing a need to put America's interests first after a global review, a move that weakens Kyiv's hand at a critical moment. The fundamental disagreement on how to proceed highlights the deep fractures within the Western alliance. While everyone desires an end to the war, the path to achieving it is fiercely contested. European leaders fear that Trump's desire for a quick and historic deal might lead him to accept terms that are unfavorable to Ukraine and damaging to European security. They see Putin's offer as a tactical ploy, whereas Trump appears to view it as a genuine opening for negotiation. This diplomatic divide risks isolating Kiev and giving Moscow a significant advantage at the bargaining table. For Ukraine, the proposal from the Alaska summit represents an existential threat. The idea of surrendering the entire Donbas region, which includes both Luhansk and Donetsk, in exchange for a frozen conflict is a non-starter for most Ukrainians. President Vladimir Zelensky and his government have consistently stated that peace cannot come at the cost of territorial integrity. Following his long conversation with President Trump and European leaders, Zelensky is now preparing for a critical face-to-face meeting in Washington, scheduled for Monday, August 18th. This meeting will be a crucial test of his ability to persuade Trump to stand firm with Ukraine. The military reality on the ground makes Ukraine's position increasingly precarious. Russian forces have been making slow but steady advances across the Eastern Front. Just last month, the Russian-installed governor of Luhansk claimed 100% control over the region, and Russian troops have now pushed to the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. While Ukraine still holds about a third of Donetsk, the constant pressure is taking a heavy toll. In response to these challenges and shifting international support, Kyiv has been forced to make difficult decisions, including withdrawing from the Ottawa Treaty to allow for the use of defensive anti-personnel landmines. Ukraine's strategy has been one of resilience and adaptation, even as its resources are stretched thin. The country is ramping up domestic production of essential military hardware, including interceptor missiles and a wide array of drones, to counter Russia's large-scale air attacks. One such attack in late June saw Russia launch nearly 450 drones and 90 missiles in a single night. While Ukraine's air defenses have proven remarkably effective, claiming to intercept the vast majority of threats, the sheer volume of these assaults is designed to exhaust and overwhelm the nation's defensive capabilities over time. President Zelensky's objective is clear. He seeks a peace based on the principles of international law, which includes the full withdrawal of Russian troops from all occupied Ukrainian territories, including Crimea and the Donbas. He understands that freezing the conflict on Russia's terms would not lead to a lasting peace, but would merely create a festering wound, allowing Moscow to consolidate its control and prepare for future aggression. As he heads to Washington, his mission is not just to reject Putin's offer, but to present a compelling alternative that safeguards Ukraine's sovereignty and future security. The next few days are poised to be decisive, potentially shaping the trajectory of the war for years to come. The upcoming meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky in Washington is the immediate focal point. If that meeting goes well, Trump has floated the idea of a subsequent three-way summit that would include Vladimir Putin. This places immense pressure on Zelensky to find common ground with Trump without sacrificing Ukraine's core principles. The outcome of these talks will determine whether the diplomatic track gains momentum, or if the conflict is destined for further escalation on the battlefield. The situation on the ground remains volatile and violent, underscoring the urgency of the diplomatic efforts. Russia continues its grinding offensive in the east, seeking to capture the entirety of the Donbas to strengthen its negotiating position. Recent claims of capturing new settlements in Donetsk and Sumy oblasts illustrate this relentless push. At the same time, Ukraine continues to demonstrate its capacity to strike back, reporting successful attacks on Russian airbases deep behind enemy lines. This brutal back and forth shows that neither side is currently capable of achieving a decisive military victory, making a negotiated settlement the only viable, albeit difficult, path. The fundamental obstacle to peace remains the chasm between the warring sides' definitions of an acceptable outcome. For Russia, victory means, at a minimum, control of the Donbas and a neutral Ukraine that is permanently outside of Western security structures. For Ukraine, peace is inseparable from sovereignty, which requires the restoration of its 1991 borders and the freedom to choose its own alliances. These positions are mutually exclusive, and bridging this gap seems nearly impossible without a dramatic shift from one or both sides, or immense pressure from international partners. Ultimately, the disagreement among world leaders on how to end the war complicates an already fraught situation. President Trump's transactional approach, focused on securing a deal, clashes with Europe's more cautious, principle-based stance. This divergence gives Putin an opportunity to exploit divisions within the Western alliance. As the world holds its breath, the fate of Ukraine hangs in the balance, caught between the ambitions of global powers and its own unyielding fight for survival. The path forward is uncertain, with the promise of peace and the peril of continued war hanging in a delicate, precarious equilibrium.